This podcast contains mature content and listener discretion is advised.
Also, be advised, we are not medical professionals and this podcast is for entertainment purposes only.
Running through the streets, solving all the mysteries, crushes and aliens, lots of other crazy things, laughing all the way. All we know is we don't know Kayla and Maggie, breaking down conspiracies, learning all the way, searching through time and space. Kayla and Maggie, now that's done, let's crack a beer.
And we're in.
We're in. Welcome to Mystery Teaming. I'm Maggie.
And I'm Kayla.
And we have a new intro song.
We have a new intro song.
I'm so excited.
I love it so much.
Me too.
It's so cute that it makes me want to cry in my heart.
Yeah. It's by Sunday Cruise. So thank you guys
thank
for
you so much.
our new song. We love it.
We love it.
Should we get into it?
Yes.
Okay. We are also shooting the podcast today, which will go on YouTube. You asked, we answered. So if you want to watch the video, go to our YouTube account, which is Mystery Team Inc.
Mhm.
But just because we're shooting doesn't mean we're doing anything any different than we always do everything. I'm just going to do the same thing I always do. Okay. Are you ready?
That was unbelievable.
Thank you.
If you want to know what she did, go to our YouTube
Go to the YouTube channel. Ready? I'm almost like nervous because I've been working really hard on it and I'm like super excited about it.
I'm so excited.
Okay.
You're in a supportive environment.
Thank you. On July 2nd, 1937, 85 years ago this month, at 14:15 Greenwich
Sorry.
Mean Time,
Are we going to cut this out? It's 85 years ago today.
that we're recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when this comes out, it'll be not. But we can leave that in. I mean,
Okay.
when we're recording it, it's 85 years ago today.
Wow.
At 14:15 Greenwich Mean Time, the U.S. Coast Guard ship, the Itasca, was waiting 250 miles off the coast of a small island in the Central Pacific. They were sending up a black plume of smoke as a signal. A voice came over the radio, unclear except for the words, "Cloudy weather, cloudy." Messages continued to come in for the next 6 hours, some incomprehensible with 5 people listening. The Itasca was radioing responses in return, but apparently they were not being received. At 17:45, the voice came over the radio again. "We must be on you, but cannot see you. But gas is running low. Have been unable to reach you by radio. We are flying at 1,000 feet." 27 minutes later, they heard, "We are circling but cannot see island. Cannot hear you. Go ahead on 7,500 kilocycles with long count either now or on schedule time on half hour." At 19:33, the voice came back. "Earhart calling Itasca. We received your signals but unable to get minimum. Please take bearings on us and answer on 3,105 kilocycles." At 2014, her voice came back over the radio. "We are on the line of position 157-337. We'll repeat this message on 6,210 kilocycles. We are now running north and south." It was the last time anyone would hear the voice of Amelia Earhart.
Yes! Yes! I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. I've been wanting to do this since we created the podcast.
Yes.
I never was ready to tackle it until now. I'm just so excited.
I'm so excited.
I get butterflies.
That's how you know it's love.
Yeah. This is going to be a multi-part series. We'll see how many. The source that I used is 500 pages. So there's a lot to cover.
I didn't know there were 500 pages to write about Amelia Earhart.
Oh boy, are you going to find out? Amelia Earhart actually wrote her own. She had an autobiography. She had a book that we're going to talk about in this episode. And then a lot of people have written biographies about her. But this is kind of the main one. It's East to the Dawn, The Life of Amelia Earhart by Susan Butler.
I love that. I feel like it's really cool that she wrote an autobiography, but it did miss the most important
Yes.
part.
True. Or did it? Because we're going to find out. You're going to find out that Amelia Earhart is truly my new hero.
Oh, I'm so excited.
She's amazing. This makes me nervous because I've been working so hard on it and I love her so much. So on July 24th, 1897, 125 years ago this month, Amelia was born in Atchison, Kansas. Her father, Samuel Edwin Stanton Earhart, went by Edwin. Her mother, Amelia, went by Amy.
Aw.
Amy was the first woman to climb Pikes Peak,
Wow.
and Edwin practiced law. A practiced law.
I really like that. It's like two intrepid explorers
Yeah, it is.
and a lawyer.
Yes. From the very first, Amelia was possessed by the spirit of adventure. She spent her early years living with her grandmother 50 miles away from her parents, but she went home during the summers. Her mother often visited her with her younger sister, Grace Muriel Earhart, who went by Muriel. No one in this family went by their first name.
Question.
Yeah.
If you were named Grace
Mm-hmm.
and then your middle name was Muriel,
Mm-hmm.
why would you then go, I would like to go by Muriel?
Because this is like 1900 when that was a cooler name, I feel.
Okay, fair enough.
It's like now how like everyone's naming their daughters like Prudence. And if your name was like Brittany Prudence, you would go by like Prudence.
That's true. And how we're going to have like a lot of old Caitlins.
Yes. A lot of old Kates or a lot of old like Tiffany's and Brittany's.
I love an old Brittany.
And like a lot of old like Rayleigh spelled like
Oh,
REIGH LEIGH.
they're going to be like, Rayleigh, get back to your room.
Rayleigh. Yes, Muriel and her mother often came to visit her. Amelia, or Millie, as she was known, is often described as a tomboy and spent much of her life playing with her three cousins who lived nearby. They would later recount how it was Amelia who taught each of them to ride a bicycle.
Oh,
She was like the intrepid leader of the group. They would spend their days exploring caves and riding the local butcher's horses on days when business was slow and he didn't need them to make deliveries because Amelia's grandmother didn't want her riding horses. Hence why she asked to ride the butchers.
why she can't ride a horse?
Because it's not ladylike. This was a time when wearing bloomers was like mildly scandalous.
Oh,
And it's not in here, but Amy actually had bloomers specially made for Amelia and Muriel so that they could play. But it was like
Aw.
other kids were like... When she was 7, her dad took her to the St. Louis World's Fair. She rode an elephant and she rode the Ferris wheel with Edwin, but her mom would not let her ride the roller coaster. To be fair, that's fair.
yeah.
It was like 1904 or something.
Yeah, it's like I wouldn't ride a hovercraft to the moon right now.
Correct. Would you?
No, my fear of death overweighs my fear of wanting to be in space and never come back.
Yeah, that's fair. When she got home, she decided to build her own roller coaster
Nice.
out of 2x4s and a wooden packing box, which she attached to some roller skates.
Honestly, that's probably what the fair
It
roller
was probably
coaster
safer.
was.
Her school friends helped her put it together, supervised by her uncle, who's like, "You're the adult here." And they used the roof of the tool shed as the launch platform.
This is amazing.
I know.
Hold on. Okay,
Yeah.
so they put roller skates on it?
Yeah, on the box. And then they used 2x4s to make like a track.
So dangerous.
So dangerous. So fun.
Unless they put like edges, like bumpers.
No.
Okay.
This is not medical advice, but the more dangerous, the more fun.
I completely disagree. The most fun I could have is in a padded room with
Yeah.
no danger. What was I thinking? Risk. No
Mhm.
risk.
Amelia was the test pilot. The box went flying off the rails, sending her somersaulting into the dirt. So they added some track to make the incline less steep, and she was back in the box. The second ride was a success, and her school friend recounted 50 years later that a ride down that thing was a thrill.
Aw. I can't believe it stayed on.
It's impressive. They're like, that's kind of a feat of engineering.
Yeah.
At school, Amelia's school headmistress once wrote, "You're going to love this. Amelia's mind is brilliant, but she refuses to do the plotting necessary to win honor prizes. She deduces the correct answers to complex arithmetic problems, but hates to put down the steps by which she arrived at the results."
Showing your work is a stupid rule.
It is.
It's a stupid
This is
rule.
us. We're not going to show our work.
I don't want to show my work. I know how I got there, but I could not explain it to you if my life depended on it.
I also wrote, this is the 1904 version of Maggie is very bright but doesn't apply herself. Which I got on basically every report card my entire life.
That's very you.
I apply myself now to important things.
College prep my ass.
Yeah. I went to a state school. Haha.
I didn't, and it drove me literally insane.
But I went to a state school out of state, so it was still as expensive as going to a private school. I'm playing 3D chess up here, you guys. Very bright, but don't apply myself. According to this biography, Amelia loved the book Black Beauty, and after reading it, Susan Butler says she had a personal mission to intercede on behalf of any horse she saw being mistreated.
Aww.
She would loosen the bridle chains on delivery men's horses when they came by, and she once caused a family fight because she refused to speak to a neighbor who mistreated his horse.
Why does it matter if she spoke to that neighbor?
Oh, I think her mom was, or her grandma or someone was probably like, be polite. And she was like,
she
no.
was like being mean.
Yeah.
Love it.
Mm-hmm. It's like when your family's like, we're having people over, and you're like, want to hide in your room.
Yeah.
And they're like, come say hi. And you're like, he mistreats his horse. I will not be associating with him.
I'm so sorry. I know that he's your friend, but like he does mistreat his horse. And I see that you're following him.
It sounds like a euphemism for something.
Yeah.
I see that you're following him. She would often lead the neighborhood kids in games of Makebelieve where they traveled to far off places, fighting off bandits and bad guys. Her favorite comics were the Katzenjammer Kids.
No.
Which you may remember.
We love the Katzenjammer Kids.
Fritz. When her school didn't have sports for girls, she made the boys teach her and her friends how to play basketball so that they could play at the single hoop down the road. When her family moved houses once, their cat, Von Sohl, who she named after a grumpy German officer from a book she was reading, I don't know what book, escaped during the move. And so she snuck back to their old house in the middle of the night with her little sister, climbed up the porch post onto the roof and into the tree to bag the cat and bring him home.
Oh.
No cat left behind. Amelia always looked up to her father, once writing, I thought that my father must have read everything and, of course, therefore, knew everything. Susan Butler describes him as a generous, creative, impulsive man, bright enough to go through Thiel College on scholarship, industrious enough to tutor his fellow law students while still a student himself. He was temperamentally unsuited for the law, and once out of school, he never really applied himself. Even worse, he was extravagant. Money ran through his hands like water. By 1903, his law practice was going so badly, he literally ran out of money.
I retract my statement earlier being like adventurous lawyer. Like that's the Earhart version of being a lawyer.
Yeah, it is. He would like... She wrote that, like, one time he wrote a letter to her. Like, they would play games where, like, he would try to stump them with vocab. And they would, like, go to the dictionary and look up, like, harder words and use them and try to stump him.
I love that.
I know. Edwin's wife, Amy, her family had money, so they would often send her money to help the family make ends meet. But her family, like, did not really approve of their marriage. And as it became clear that he, like, couldn't provide for the family, they felt even more, like, justified in disliking the union. In 1908, Edwin was offered a job as a claims agent for a railroad line, which required the family to move to Des Moines, Iowa. When he was in town, because he traveled a lot for work, but when he was in town, he would organize big games for the neighborhood kids every Saturday. He would take the girls fishing. And by 1909, he was the head of the claims department at the railroad. The family could now afford tickets to the concert series at a local conservatory. And after the shows, Amelia and her dad would sit at the piano and play the songs they'd heard by ear.
Aww.
Amelia became particularly fond of Wagner.
Oh.
Edwin traveled for work a lot, and so he would write letters home to the family. And there's an excerpt from a letter he wrote in August 1909 to Muriel, written on official railroad stationery, because, you know, he was in the claims department. And it said, Dear Madam, I have your claim for $5 for having been bitten by a mosquito on our train. Before we can pay the same, we would at least like to know how big a bite the mosquito took, and we would like to see the mosquito.
What a fun dad.
Yes, but as is often the case, Edwin didn't get better with money when he had more of it. He earned more and he spent more. By 1911, Edwin was drinking heavily, and that summer he decided to leave Amy. She begged him to come back, and eventually he did, but the whole ordeal prompted Amy's parents to change their wills. Amy's parents' wills stipulated that Amy's portion of their estate was to be held in a trust for 15 years, during which time Amy's brother Mark had full control of the trust. They did this because they didn't want Edwin to have access to the money. They didn't trust him with it.
As much as I love him, I wouldn't either.
It's fair. When they passed away a few months later, the terms were published in the local newspaper, and everyone was able to see their total lack of confidence in Edwin.
That's so sad.
Amy would spend the next several years fighting for her inheritance while Edwin continued to spiral. One Saturday, Amelia, Muriel, and the neighborhood kids excitedly awaited Edwin's arrival to begin their weekly game. But when he stepped off the streetcar, they all ran to meet him, only to find that he was drunk.
Oh.
He told them he didn't feel well and couldn't play. Amelia, Muriel, and 10 other children all stood in shock as Amelia's mother firmly shut the door behind him. His job sent him to a hospital specializing in alcoholism for a month, and he came back sober, but soon he was drinking again. Edwin then got a job in the claims office of a railroad in Springfield, Missouri, so he packed up the family and moved them to Missouri, only to discover that there had apparently been a mistake and there was no job. Depends on who you ask. According to the biography, it was a mistake. I read somewhere else that he lied or misunderstood the situation. But at any rate, it was the last straw. So Amy, Amelia, and Muriel moved to Chicago to stay with friends in the summer of 1914. Amelia did not like the school in the neighborhood they were going to move to because it's the public schools are by district, much the way they are now. So she canvassed all the nearby schools to find the one with the best science department.
How old was she at this time?
This is 1914, so she would have been, she started school at 17, so she was an older teen.
She started high school at 17?
She started this school at 17.
Oh, okay.
Because they moved
They
moved to Chicago. So she found Hyde Park, which was a school that was, the best of the best public schools. And according to East to the Dawn, when she started attending Hyde Park at the age of 17, she, quote, never made the slightest effort to fit in. She didn't participate in any sports, clubs, or extracurriculars, which was out of character for her. The book says it was probably because she was dealing with the separation from her parents.
That's so sad.
In her high school yearbook, there is a quote near a picture of her that says, "Meek loveliness is round thee spread." And Susan Butler writes, "It is so far off the mark that it indicates beyond question that she had remained an unknown quantity to her classmates who produced the book."
Wow.
It's like if your high school yearbook said
meek loveliness.
Yeah, meek loveliness is round thee spread.
Yeah.
Not at all. And the picture of her, she looks very
yeah, mad.
Meanwhile, Amy continued to fight for her inheritance, and Edwin, who was finally recovering enough to function, filed suit on her behalf to reclaim her money from her brother Mark, who had actually passed away at this point. But the courts were still in control of the trust.
So Mark was technically in charge of her
Trust. For 15 years. But the 15 years had not elapsed.
So then what happens when he dies? It goes to the court?
I think it's in probate. You have to file to get it. When the courts awarded her control of her trust, she and her sister, who also had her money in the trust, discovered that Mark had spent almost all of it. She had a suspicion that he was not taking care of it. I don't have time to go into it in this episode, but she'd been fighting for it the whole time because she didn't trust him.
Is there nothing in place that says, even though you're in control of it, you're not allowed to spend it because it's not yours?
Apparently not. It's also 1900, so I think there were probably less laws on the books than there are now about this kind of stuff.
Sometimes men, in my own personal experience, can be disappointing.
Some men are disappointing. Hot take. Should we get a shirt?
Some men are disappointing.
Some men can be disappointing.
Yes, can be is the. I'm not saying you are a bitch. I'm saying you're acting like a bitch.
I'm not saying all men are disappointing. I'm saying some men can be disappointing.
Yeah, put it on a shirt.
Amelia had her sights set on Bryn Mawr for college, but with the money that remained, Amy sent her to Ogontz, which was a finishing school in Pennsylvania where she could earn college credits. I don't know that they could have afforded Bryn Mawr at this point. I'm not sure if that was the reasoning. She excelled in all her courses. She devoured literature by Wordsworth, Byron, Burns, and Shakespeare. She was so good at field hockey that she was invited to join one of the secret societies.
How are those things related?
She was invited to join like the athletic sorority. At the time,
Oh.
sororities and frats were like secret societies.
In my head, I was like, why? If she's so good at field hockey, is she being invited to like
Join the Freemasons?
Yes.
Didn't you know?
How do those things connect at all?
Didn't you know that the Freemasons, the like barrier for entry is field hockey prowess?
I had no idea.
It's a man's sport. Some men can play field hockey. In letters from the time, she tells her mother that she can wear an old suit with some alterations as she doesn't want to spend money unnecessarily, and asking Amy not to send her money since she knows that they need it more than she does. In 1917, the U.S. entered World War I.
Wow, what happened with that?
It was fine. They made a sequel.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Was it worse?
No
than the
new
first
IP.
one? Was it like Shrek 2 or was it like...
Nothing will ever be like Shrek 2.
I know.
But you wouldn't really get the second one unless you've seen the first one.
Oh, okay. It's like a lot of lore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 1917, the U.S. entered World War I, and that winter, Amelia and her mother traveled to Toronto, where Muriel was attending St. Margaret's. Amelia encountered wounded soldiers returning from war, and seeing the devastation, she said, "Returning to school was impossible if there was work that I could do." She withdrew from school, moved into an apartment hotel with Muriel, and signed up for the voluntary aid detachment to work as a nurse's aide. A few months later, she wrote to her mother, "I am a busy person. I entered into a class of home nursing, and am going on with the class, although they are half through. Mrs. Holland's physician asked me to come to the clinic, where he diagnoses and prescribes to poor people and asks the class to diagnose before he tells them what really is the matter. That is not compulsory, of course, but I am getting everything I can. Also, all lectures possible. I'm going to see an operation if I can wheedle anybody into letting me."
I love that.
The thing about Amelia Earhart is that from day one, she was always just like doing things her way. Like they were like, girls can't do this. And she was like, well, I'll make the boys teach me. And like they wouldn't let her like be a doctor. So she was like, I'll just go to the operation myself if anybody will let me. It's not that they wouldn't let her be a doctor, but you know how it is.
That's just how things were. And she was like, can they not be like this?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they were like, yeah, I guess.
In her spare time, she rode horses. Once she was riding a horse named Dynamite, who was known for bucking off an Air Force colonel,
Oh.
when she ran into some Royal Air Force guys. And they were so impressed by her horsemanship and her ability to ride the notorious Dynamite that they invited her out to the airfield to watch them fly their airplanes. She stood so close to them that the propellers whipped snow in her face. She so enjoyed watching them that she tried to get permission to be taken up, but was denied.
Why? She rode the horse.
It's the military.
But she rode the horse.
I know. She said that like even the colonel's wives weren't allowed to ride in the airplanes, but they were allowed to do practically anything else.
But did they ride the horse?
Did they ride Dynamite? It's like a sword in the stone situation. Like whoever can ride the horse can fly in the airplanes.
I don't understand why that's not how it is. Okay, wait. Follow-up question. If riding the horse does not let you get on the plane, does being bucked by the horse revoke your privileges to be on the plane?
No, because I think that guy stayed an Air Force colonel.
But he fell off the horse.
Oh, but I don't know if he ever flew. Got him.
Got him.
Loophole. Soon after that, she attended the Toronto Fair, where she watched flying aces giving a stunt flying exhibition. One of the pilots began swooping at the crowds just for fun. He spotted Amelia and her friend watching in a clearing and dived right at them. Her friend ran away, but Amelia just stood there as the plane, like...
She was like, take me, I rode the horse.
She did. Amelia later recalled, "I remember the mingled fear and pleasure which surged over me as I watched that small plane at the top of its earthward swoop. I did not understand it at the time, but I believe that little red airplane said something to me as it swished by." And that's where we will pick back up after the break.
No.
We'll be right back after the break.
We'll be right back.
After these messages. And we're back.
We're back.
Welcome back to Mystery Team Inc., the podcast that we're still making.
I was like, you really walked us into a trap there.
Ready?
Yes. I'm just really excited.
Me too.
Okay, so last we left her, there was a red plane.
Mhm.
Like she's Snoopy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That summer, a flu epidemic hit Canada, brought home by the troops in Europe. It killed 30 to 50,000 people.
Wow.
Instead of going home, Amelia stayed and worked in the hospitals as they became increasingly shorthanded. Eventually, she got the flu and developed a severe bacterial infection in her sinuses that would cause her problems for the rest of her life. Because antibiotics had not been discovered yet, the only treatment was a surgery to open the sinuses.
Oh, yucky.
Yeah.
Ugh.
The next fall, Amelia's parents reconciled and decided to move to sunny Los Angeles, California.
Wow, who would live there?
Only someone...
Beautiful, beautiful ladies with grace rounding abounds.
with meek loveliness.
Yes.
Around. With rounding abound. Amelia, meanwhile, moved back east and enrolled in Columbia University's extension program to study medicine.
Wow, who would do that?
Who would go to Columbia? While there, she continued her characteristic activism, campaigning for a professor who had been passed over for a promotion. She and her best friend Louise climbed to the top of the low library dome and took pictures of each other while the students below applauded.
I've done that.
Those photos still exist, and I will try to post one on the Instagram. In the spring, her parents begged her to come to Los Angeles to live with them, so she went, intending to re-enroll at a college in Los Angeles in the fall. Not long after arriving in Los Angeles, she attended an air meet with Edwin in 1920.
A what?
An air meet. It was like where like pilots would come fly planes and they would have all the nice new planes for you to look at, and they would do like stunt exhibitions. And after that air meet that she went to with her dad, she went to every air meet that came through.
That's so cute.
By December, she was begging Edwin to help her get lessons. He was able to buy her a ticket to ride as a passenger in a plane piloted by a young ex-Army officer named Frank Hawks.
Was he cute?
I don't know. They took off from Rogers Airport, which was at the corner of Fairfax and Wilshire Boulevard.
Wait, what?
It's obviously no longer there.
I was going to say, I've never seen a plane there before.
No, it does not exist anymore. After that, she said, at the age of 23, I knew I myself had to fly. But she didn't want to learn from Frank because she didn't like his attitude. So she sought out Nita Snook, a 24-year-old pilot who was famously the only female pilot in Southern California who gave lessons.
I love that. I always choose a woman. Like if I'm like, I have to
Me too.
learn something or do something, I don't want a man.
Some men
Some
can
men.
be disappointing. Nita recounted years later how Amelia and her father approached her on the runway as she was climbing into her plane to give a lesson. She said, I'm Amelia Earhart and this is my father. I see you're busy, but could I have a few words with you? Then she said, I want to fly. Will you teach me? Amelia didn't have the money, but Nita agreed to teach her on credit. Amelia showed up to her first lesson wearing her riding outfit and carrying a book about aerodynamics under her arm.
She was like, did you know I rode that horse?
Well, she didn't have like a pilot outfit,
Yeah.
and pilots had to wear pants because in order to get into the plane, you had to swing your leg over into the cockpit. And so the closest thing she had to a pilot outfit was her riding outfit.
Planes are just air horses.
It's what I always say.
I know.
This is a sidebar. Nita had dropped out of college to go to flying school, but then the war happened. So after the war, she bought a wrecked Canadian biplane and using the information she learned in flying school, rebuilt it in her backyard. And that was the plane that she gave lessons in.
I love that so much.
Flying at this time was incredibly dangerous. Antoine Saint-Exupéry is actually quoted in this book. He's the author of The Little Prince.
Mhm.
And he explained that at this time, sometimes the engine would just drop out of a plane.
Hate that.
Of the first 40 pilots hired by the U.S. Post Office to deliver airmail, 31 of them died.
I'll say it again. Postal workers are the heroes of our country.
You're right.
We had a hot postal worker
Oh, is that why?
at my old building.
I should have known there was a reason that you were advocating for the USPS.
No, that was genuine. But also, side note, we did have a hot mail carrier. So if you're out there, just know you're doing a great job. Please don't contact me.
Giving lessons was even more dangerous because planes had dual controls and no override. It's like a driver's ed car, but if the driver didn't have, like if the teacher didn't have brakes. So if your student froze at the stick, they would, and this happened, they could just nosedive you into the ground and there was nothing you could do. In this book, they talk about one like very famous, very skilled, talented pilot who gave lessons, and his plane crashed while he was giving a lesson, and they found that his stick had been bent because he'd been trying so hard to pull up.
Okay, wait, then why are there two?
Because the person learning needs to be, well, I think there are two because you're supposed to have a pilot and a co-pilot, and that way the co-pilot can also pilot the controls. But when you're learning, you have to be able to move the stick and the rudder, which is on the floor. And then if the pilot is supposed to be able to like also maneuver it.
Oh, so then
but it's just like that guy, he just like froze.
But if he's still trying to control the plane, then that means that
the person getting the lesson froze with the stick pushed down.
Oh, and that because it was pushed down, that meant that the
plane was just going like this.
Teacher couldn't.
And he was pulling up on it and bent it. He bent it trying to pull up the plane.
He couldn't just.
Amelia said that she wouldn't give lessons unless there was some kind of rig set up to knock out the person getting lessons.
That's genius.
I know. She should have been an inventor. Side note, and I didn't write about this, but her dad also at one point like decided, this is back in her childhood or her teen years, decided like when his law practice was going really badly, he decided to just become an inventor, and he invented this like flagpole for the back of a caboose, and he went to Washington he worked on it for like 2 years, went to Washington DC to patent it, and discovered that it had been patented like 2 years ago.
Oh.
And then he wrote a letter back that said spilt milk and duplicate patents are equally useless, so I'm coming home.
I love that.
Amelia took a job as a file clerk for a telephone company and started saving her money. For her 24th birthday, she managed to buy her first plane with her parents' help. She and Nita grew apart, and Amelia wanted to learn stunting so that she'd feel comfortable flying her on her own because she didn't believe that. She wanted to be able to basically save it no matter what position she was in. And she was like, unless I learn stunting, like how to stall a plane midair, I'm not going to know how to like save a plane if it stalls midair. So she didn't feel comfortable flying by herself until she learned stunting.
That's smart.
So she started taking stunting lessons from an ex-Army pilot. And before long, she was stunting in air meets as a featured flyer.
Wow.
They were like putting her on the thing as like the like daredevil girl, basically, where they were like
girl who dared to do a man's thing.
Episode title. Oh God, yeah. No, it literally was. Yeah, it was like a. I mean, there were other women pilots, as we'll learn in the second episode, but especially, I don't know. They just, when they would have these meets, they would have like a special card of her that was like Amelia Earhart.
Yeah. She rode the horse and she can fly a plane.
Mm-hmm. Amelia quickly established a new altitude record, becoming the first woman to fly 14,000 feet. Shortly thereafter, Amelia encouraged her parents to invest in a gypsum mine that had recently been bought by her friend Peter. But the investment was a failure, and the family lost all the money that they invested.
Did they know that you can sled on gypsum?
I don't know if they knew that.
Well,
but, and I didn't write about this either, she and Edwin went to go to the mine to see Peter, and there was like a flash flood, and Peter drowned, and the truck that was carrying like all the gypsum got washed away. It was very traumatic for her.
Is it water soluble?
I have no idea. But it was bad.
Can you imagine if you had a water soluble product?
I don't think it is, but yeah, can you imagine if it was like you have like a truck full of cotton candy?
Cotton candy is not what I was like. Salt?
No, but it's just funny because they would just like literally go like. Pff.
This is our new enterprise.
In order to make some more money, Amelia took on a boarder, which was a young man named Sam Chapman. They got along famously and eventually developed a relationship.
I was going to ask if he was cute.
They also went to at least one like workers' labor union meeting in like the early days of the labor movement together.
I once did date a guy who refused to go to a protest with me, and that's why we ended it.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yes, vividly.
What a treat of a human being.
Right. I think that's a totally valid reason.
It was.
If someone isn't like ideologically on the same page as you and willing to like put themselves in like physically in your cause with you, then like, are you guys on the same page?
Yeah. And the problem with that one was I was like, do you want to go to a protest with me? And he was like, I actually don't really, believe that what you're protesting is happening because there's no way the government would do that.
Right.
And B, care. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing a man has ever said to
It's
me.
like we always say, some men can be disappointing. So Amelia sold her plane to save money or to get money for the family. And she tried to develop a quote unquote well-paying career. First as a photographer, which she was really good at, but made no money. And then driving a sand and gravel truck to deliver materials for real estate construction.
Hasn't she learned not to get in trucks with it?
She actually apparently was a great driver, and people like when people would get in the car with her, they said that she driving like a daredevil, like
Driving
a race car
like someone
driver.
who stunted planes.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. While doing this, she saved money for a new plane. Then Edwin decided it was time to end his marriage to Amy, and the two filed for divorce.
Oh, they were not doing well this whole time.
I guess not. They kept like it was like they were kind of back and forth, like they would try to reconcile. And once her parents' divorce was final, Amy and her mother moved back east. Amelia sold her plane, again, her new plane, to buy a little roadster, which she and Amy drove across the country. It was like a little yellow roadster.
I love this.
They would stop at national parks on the way. When they got to the East Coast, she re-enrolled in Columbia to pursue a degree in engineering.
Wow, nerd.
Her mom went to Boston where she lived with Muriel, but by April of 1925, she had to drop out again because they couldn't afford tuition. She moved to Boston with her mom to live with her mom and Muriel and dreamed of going to MIT.
Is she me?
She might be. She applied for a scholarship but was turned down.
I was also turned down.
She's you. She doesn't show her work.
Didn't get into
Didn't
MIT.
get into MIT.
I was deferred. Does that count for anything in your 30s?
I feel like it does.
Okay.
So Amelia went to the Women's Educational and Industrial Union in hopes of finding work. It was basically a place that like helped women find purpose in life and find careers. She filled out a job application and proceeded through interviews. She was eventually sent to interview at Denison House, which was a settlement house which provided social services for immigrants and was also the space for union meetings in the early days of the labor movement. They hired Amelia on as a social worker despite the fact that she had no experience. They just really liked her.
That's the key. You can get any job if people just like you.
Yeah, she was just very charming. While she was there, she quickly became everyone's favorite and fell in love with social work.
Aww.
She worked with children of all different ages and their families. She was so loved at Denison House that she became a director of Denison House, one of the only new staff on the board.
Wow.
And she also became a delegate to the conference of the National Federation of Settlements. She was basically like, she went to her first conference and told them that like the next one should be more inclusive. On July 24th, 1927, Amelia turned 30.
Wow.
She was still engaged to Sam, who was working as an engineer at Boston Edison and who was, quote, patiently waiting for Amelia to settle down and marry him.
Aww.
Little did he know she was not planning on settling down at all. She joined the Boston chapter of the National Aeronautic Association, and within a year, she was vice president, the first woman officer of the NAA.
I wish I could meet her.
She's my actual hero now. Like, after reading this book, I'm like, oh, this woman is my new, like, hero.
This is how charming I wish that I was.
Me too. Does having a podcast count for anything?
No. If anything, it's working against us. Have you ever had to tell someone, I have a podcast?
I hate to tell them. The same year, Charles Lindbergh completed his North Atlantic flight. In the following year, 55 people attempted the flight solo. 5 of them were women. Out of the 55, 14 died. 3 of the women who attempted it disappeared.
Disappeared.
Like their planes just never landed.
I think that they may have found like a wormhole to like a planet where there are no men. And they were
just
like,
went there.
They were like, yeah.
A wealthy woman named Amy Phipps Guest wanted to be the first woman to cross the Atlantic, not as a pilot, just as a passenger. At the same time, another rich woman named Mabel Bowl also wanted to be the first woman to cross the Atlantic and also had no interest in piloting the plane, as she dubbed that man's work.
This is very Elon.
Mm-hmm. They were both, yeah, it's exactly that. Mabel was like known as kind of a daredevil, but she was like, yeah, she just like came from money and wore a lot of like expensive jewelry and wanted to be the first one to like do all of the adventures.
Yeah.
She arranged for such a flight, Mabel did, on a plane belonging to Commander Richard Byrne, who was famous for his expeditions to the Antarctic. To Mabel's dismay, he sold the plane out from under her to Amy Guest. And on April 9th, the plane was brought to Boston for the flight.
That's so rude.
It was converted into a seaplane in hopes that Amy could land on the Thames in front of the Houses of Parliament just for the drama.
I love that.
Amy named the plane Friendship to symbolize the relationship between England and the U.S. However, she failed to tell her family about the endeavor until shortly before the flight, at which point the entire family begged her not to go. She had multiple children, and they were like, "You can't." One of them was about to pass the bar, and he was like, "If you go, I'm gonna fail the bar. Like, you can't go. I'm gonna be so worried about you." They were all
wow,
like,
that sounds like a you problem.
It is selfish, but she was like, "Okay, fine, I'm not gonna go."
You can take the bar again.
There's only one chance to be the first woman across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
You can take the bar anytime.
Also, you're a man. You could probably be like, my mom flew across the ocean. I couldn't take it. And they'd be like, whatever, here you go. You're a lawyer.
You're right. But she still wanted the first woman to cross the Atlantic to be American. So she told the family lawyer who had arranged the sale of the plane to find her someone else to do it. She was going to sponsor the trip.
Okay.
She asked that the candidate be a lady, educated, and if possible, a flyer.
Oh, to take her place.
Mm-hmm.
In my head, I was like, well, she's going to go later.
No.
And she just wants a different pilot.
Then she wouldn't be first.
Yeah.
So she was like, I still want the first woman across the Atlantic to be an American. So I'm going to sponsor the trip and I'm going to find someone to go in my place.
When was the bar?
I don't know.
Like, how soon was it?
It was, I think, while she was like, it was like the week she was planning to go.
So take it and then go the day after. I hate this, son.
It's fair.
No child of mine is going to take the bar.
Especially at the expense of being a pioneer of aviation for you.
They're going to be like, please, Mom, don't ride that hover car to the moon. I'm trying to take the bar.
And you're going to be like,
it's
I have to find the wormhole to the planet of only women. George Putnam, the publisher of Charles Lindbergh's book, caught wind of the situation. He was just on a ferry to Staten Island and happened to sit down next to a Norwegian pilot who had heard about the sale of the plane.
Wow.
And immediately asked his PR specialist to track down those involved, later saying, "And here I had stumbled upon an adventure in the making, which, once completed, certainly should provide a book." George's publishing house had, according to Susan Butler, cornered the market on heroes, publishing books by all the big adventurers of the time.
Does he just run into a Norwegian pilot that's like got an ear to the grapevine every day?
Yes, apparently.
That's very lucky.
No, I mean, he arranged, and he would sometimes, fund their trips, and he sent his 12-year-old son to the Galapagos, and the son, kept a diary, and they published it as,
there you go, Daddy needs a book.
Yeah, literally. He got in touch with them, and they were like, yeah, we're looking for someone else to do it. So George Putnam's PR specialist, who was from Boston, reached out to his pilot friend from Boston, who was in the NAA. And the Boston NAA pilot said, "Why, yes, I know a young social worker who flies."
It's all about who you know.
Correct. Amelia's final interview for the stunt included this exchange. "Why do you want to fly the Atlantic?" "Why does a man ride a horse?" "Because he wants to, I guess." "Well, then." My hero!
That is so good.
She was chosen to make the flight. She would be a passenger in the plane with the pilot, Wilmer, a.k.a. Bill Stoltz, co-pilot, Lewis, a.k.a. Slim Gordon, and an auxiliary pilot, Lou Gower.
Why is she... It's not a pilot.
Because this was not the arrangement. She flew by maps, and this was a flight that had to be made by instruments, because when you're over the ocean, you can't see the ground. There's no landmarks.
Have they tried just going lower?
She didn't have the expertise yet to make a flight like this.
Oh.
But she was in charge of the flight logs. And she was like learning everything while she was flying with them.
So cool.
They would be paid. She would not. Everyone's movements were to be kept under wraps to avoid being hounded by the press. Amelia arranged a short will and wrote letters to her family in case of her death. To her mother, she wrote, "Even though I have lost, the adventure was worthwhile. Our family tends to be too secure. My life has really been very happy, and I didn't mind contemplating its end in the midst of it."
Dang.
To her father, she wrote, "Dearest Dad, hooray for the last grand adventure. I wish I had won, but it was worthwhile anyway. You know that. I have no faith we'll meet anywhere again, but I wish we might. Anyway, goodbye and good luck to you. Affectionately, your daughter, Mill."
I know there's nothing after death,
But I wish there would be.
but wouldn't it be fun if there was?
On June 3rd, 1928, Amelia and the rest of the crew climbed into the plane, Amelia sitting on the bag of flying suits that they had packed for high altitude.
They didn't even give her a chair.
They didn't even have a seat. But the plane couldn't become airborne because pontoons, unlike wheels, stick to the water and require sufficient power to be pulled directly off the water. They took out 6 of their 8 cans of gasoline and tried again, 42 pounds lighter, but the plane still couldn't take off. They all knew that the problem was the weight, so they called over a small boat, and the auxiliary pilot, Lou Gower, climbed out of the plane.
Aww.
They made another attempt, and the plane lifted into the air, bound for Newfoundland, and then on to Southampton,
What a
England.
bummer if you're Lou.
Poor Lou. Back in Boston, Mabel Bowl got word of the Friendship's departure.
Oh, I forgot this plane is called the Friendship.
The next day, the Herald Tribune carried the story, "Miss Bowl challenged her woman rival to a race across the Atlantic." She prepared to leave the next morning. In Newfoundland, the 3 tried to keep Amelia hidden so as not to arouse the press, but the newspapers had already printed headlines like, "Boston Girl starts for Atlantic hop," and "Boston Girl's plane landed at Trespassy, Newfoundland at 12:55. Weather and plane problems kept the trio in Trespassy, Newfoundland for a few weeks, during which time Mabel and her plane were able to make it to Harbor Grace, which is 75 miles northeast of Trespassy. So they were both like stationed in Canada, ready to make the flight.
Oh my God.
Mabel sent the Friendship crew a taunting telegram suggesting they all take off from Harbor Grace at the same time. Her plane was actually faster.
That's so good.
The Friendship ignored the telegram and attempted to take off multiple times, but never made it out of Trespassy Harbor.
Because the pontoons were like...
It was too heavy. June 17th, the weather in Trespassy was clear, and Amelia decided they needed to leave today to beat Mabel and her plane, Columbia. The pilot of Amelia's plane, Bill, was hungover as hell, and he didn't like the weather report, which showed storms over the Atlantic. Amelia was in charge, and she ultimately made the decision and said, "We're going anyway. I don't give a F."
Thanks for censoring yourself on this explicit podcast.
I always forget where I am.
I don't give a heck.
She was like, "I don't give a fuck." So reporters remembered seeing Amelia and Bill walking down the beach arguing because he was like, we're not going.
Why was she in charge?
Because she was acting in Amy's stead, and so they put her in charge, basically.
Oh, okay.
She told the reporters, "We are going in spite of everything. We're going today and we're going to make it." At 11:10, they climbed into the plane. Lewis Gordon climbed onto the pontoons and cranked the engines. That's where we're at with flight right now. You have to crank the engines.
That's scary.
The first attempt failed, and once again, they had to dump off a bunch of gas. They dumped off so much gas that they only had 700 gallons of fuel.
It just feels like that's the one thing you don't want to get rid of.
Listen, they already got rid of the guy.
I know.
Takeoff took 3 full minutes, which is incredibly dangerous. But the plane eventually climbed into the air, only carrying 700 gallons of fuel. They radioed that their new destination was Ireland because they only had exactly enough fuel to make it to Ireland. No mistakes. No capes. Mabel's pilot, a flying ace, refused to fly into the storms, which was probably more better advised. But when Mabel found out that the Friendship had taken off anyway, she was furious and accused the Weather Bureau of sending them different weather reports. They had not. George Putnam later said it was either the best decision or the silliest decision Amelia ever made.
That's fair.
Amelia had to sit on the gas cans in the cabin because now they had to wear their flight suits.
Oh.
They flew through the Atlantic storm. Amelia wrote in the flight logs that there were snow flurries below them and fog in front. They couldn't see anything for most of the flight, and she said they may as well have been flying over the cornfields of Kansas for all they could see.
How high were they flying?
I'm not actually sure. At one point, they climbed up to 11,000 feet to try to get through the clouds, but they were not flying super high.
So you would be able to see the ocean.
Yeah, but they couldn't through the clouds.
Yeah, but if
Like,
there weren't clouds,
yes.
it would have been cool.
Yes, it would
And
have
so
been.
it's a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Clouds are cool too.
Clouds are cool, too. Amelia reportedly discovered that Bill had stashed a bottle of liquor on board.
Oh,
Bill had been known to drink heavily, and according to Susan Butler, Amelia later told George Putnam that she'd become so worried about Bill's condition that she had come very close to wiring him to replace the pilot, possibly with Lou, who had climbed off before they left on the flight.
yeah, that would have been probably smart.
The book says that there were multiple reasons that she didn't, but one of it is like she thought they would just like call off the whole thing.
Oh, that's fair.
Pushing through the hail and fog, they were able to radio Cape Race, Newfoundland to get their bearings and adjust. And when they came out the other side of the storm, they were only 10 miles off course. After that communication, their radio stopped working.
Mm-mm.
At one point, they flew up to 11,000 feet to try to get above the clouds, to no avail. They were like big cumulonimbus clouds, and they were literally like, some of them could be up to like 20,000 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
With no radio to connect with ships and no visibility, they had no way of knowing how close or far from Ireland they really were. When they came down from the clouds, they saw the SS America, which meant that they were close to a shipping lane, which was a good sign. But the ship should have been on the same course as they were, and instead it was going perpendicular to their direction.
No, opposite.
A bad sign. Their radio couldn't send messages, but they thought that maybe they could receive messages. So they dove down to drop a note on the deck of the SS America, asking them to radio them their coordinates. Apparently, people did this at this time. Like, it wasn't totally unheard of, but it was risky because they had no fuel. So they tied the note to one of their 2 remaining oranges, and they dropped it on, like, attempting to land it on the deck, and they missed by 200 yards, which is not that far in terms of, like, swooping.
And now they only have 1 orange left.
They tried again with their last orange,
No.
burning more fuel because they had to circle the ship. They missed again. With very little fuel left, Bill looked at Amelia and said, "Well, that's out," and centered the plane back on course.
Don't they have pontoons on it?
They do. They could have landed there, but then they couldn't have taken off again, so they wouldn't have succeeded in making the flight.
This is the problem with adventurous people.
They apparently talked about landing and like accepting defeat, but making it out with their lives, and that was when Bill said, "Well, that's out."
This is how I know that I'm not an adventurer.
I know.
I would have been like, look, they have
Let's
oranges.
just land.
We'll be safe there. Whatever. Who really cares?
The SS America painted their position on the deck of the ship for the plane, but by the time that they finished, the Friendship was gone. They didn't know it at the time, but they were only a mile off course. They had flown right over Ireland, but couldn't see it because of the fog.
No.
The SS America had been in the Irish Sea, and that's why it looked like it was going the wrong way.
No.
They had actually overshot their destination.
No.
Finally, the crew of the Friendship spotted land. They followed the coast and landed in a bay. The owner of a local metal company, Norman Fisher, rowed out to the plane and knocked on it. According to one source, Amelia stuck her head out and said, "We've come from America. Where are we?" Norman informed them that they were in Wales. In his first interview, Bill told the press, "I came ashore to see about gasoline. At the moment, I have not enough to let us rise again." As Susan Butler puts it, the Friendship was out of gas.
That's so sad.
They had just made it.
I love that they landed in Wales.
Me too. After refueling, they took off for Southampton, England, which is where they were supposed to land. Massive crowds cheered their arrival, and Amelia was an instant celebrity, the first woman to cross the Atlantic by plane. But Amelia felt the praise belonged to the actual pilots. When asked about the flight, she lamented, "I was just baggage like a sack of potatoes." Then she said, "Maybe someday I'll try it alone." And that's where we will pick back up in part 2.
More.
When Amelia does.
So they did it.
They did it.
Did
They were
Mabel
the
even
first.
take off?
I don't know. I don't know what happened to Mabel. She probably did.
Or she was like, nah.
I'll look it up and find out for the next
Yeah,
episode.
please.
Let everyone know.
Oh my God, incredible.
I love her so much.
I love her
She's my hero.
so much. She's
What a
so
badass.
cool.
She's so cool.
I love that. I can't wait.
I love that she got to do it and be the first woman. And she was like, it was fun, but I want to do it.
Yeah.
I love her.
I love her so much. I can't wait for the next part.
Me neither. Part.
Who's to say? Great job.
Thanks.
Great research.
Amelia.
I now see how there are long books about her.
Yes.
I'm obsessed.
Her life is fascinating. If anyone is interested, I highly recommend this book. It is a lot of pages, but it is like such a good book.
That was amazing.
Thanks.
I'm so excited about this series.
Me too.
I'm really glad that I didn't guess what it was.
Me too.
Mm.
I was scared you were going to guess. I knew
Well,
if I gave you any hints, you'd
yeah.
figure it out.
Right before we started, I was like, Lindbergh baby? No.
Oh, nice.
But that's not a disappearance.
No.
That's a moito.
It is a moito. We should cover that someday.
It's on my list, don't worry.
Just because it's like technically been kind of solved doesn't mean we can't do it, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, unsolved is relative.
You're right.
I can just decide that that's not correct, and then it's unsolved. Great.
We did it. We unsolved it.
We unsolved it.
Mystery Team Inc. Unsolving mysteries since 2018.
I love that.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your phenomenal research.
Thanks for watching if you're watching.
Yeah. Can't wait to see how this works out.
Me neither.
Good thing you're beautiful.
Good thing you're beautiful. Good thing both halves of your face are your better side.
Aw.
You're my better half.
Aw.
Aw. And smarter too.
Mm.
We don't know.
Stay in your lane.
Buckle the buck up.
Air smooches.
World's best flying smooches.
That's it. Goodbye.
Goodbye.